You know, sometimes the scariest things start with the most ordinary moments. Picture this: a Sunday dinner, the whole family around the table, the smell of roast chicken and cherry pie. Mom is pouring tea and suddenly asks that very question. So son, are you getting ready for your 23rd birthday? Such a milestone. And in that moment, everything inside me freezes. Because in our family, there is one topic everyone discusses in whispers: the curse of the 23s. It started as a scary story told at night. My great-grandfather died at a steel plant in Detroit on the very day of his 23rd birthday. Then my grandmother's sister died of a heart attack during her birthday dinner. My mom's cousin, his car went off a cliff on his way home from his birthday party. I always brushed it off, said it was just statistical coincidences. But when you yourself turn 22 years and 9 months old, those coincidences start haunting you in every nightmare. 3 months before my birthday, something inexplicable started happening to me. I began waking up exactly at 3:23 a.m. The very time, I later learned, my grandmother's sister had died. Every single night like clockwork. And then there was that incident on my way to work. I was walking my usual route, listening to music through my headphones. And suddenly, it is hard to explain, something clicked in the back of my head. A primal sense of danger made me literally jump forward. In the next instant, a black SUV at full speed smashed into a lamppost right where I had been standing a second before. The pole collapsed, glass shattering everywhere. The driver later told the police his accelerator pedal had stuck. An accident. But when I looked at my watch, it showed 8:23 a.m. that same night. I woke up again at 3:23. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like it wanted to escape my chest. I sat down at my computer and began my own investigation. The clock struck 4 a.m. when I found the first death: grandfather, 1951. Then the second, the third. When the count reached 7, my hands went cold. 7 deaths over 70 years. All on their 23rd birthday, all under strange circumstances. And the creepiest part, all the medical reports and police files had been lost or destroyed. The next morning, I went to see Aunt Irina. She lives in an old house on the outskirts of town that smells of incense and old books. At first, we drank tea with her famous apple pie, talked about my job, about her garden. But when I cautiously asked, "Auntie, is it true that people in our family die at 23?" Her face turned to stone. She set her cup down with such force that the tea splashed out. "Why are you digging up these old bones?" Her voice trembled. I explained that my birthday was in a week and I was scared. She was silent for a long time, looking out the window at the apple trees in the garden. Then she slowly turned around, and I saw she was pale as a ghost. "They all died between 3 and 4 in the afternoon," she whispered so quietly I could barely hear. "Your great grandfather at 3:17, grandmother's sister at 3:45, the cousin at 4 o'clock exactly. We stopped celebrating birthdays at that age because of it." She stood up abruptly and her cup fell to the floor, shattering. "And don't ever ask me about this again." The morning of my 23rd birthday began with anxious anticipation. I told all my friends I was leaving town, turned off my phone, and locked myself in my apartment with every lock I had. I slid the bolt, propped a chair under the doorknob. I basically built a fortress. I sat on the sofa and watched the large wall clock that once belonged to my grandfather. The hand moved agonizingly slowly. 10 o'clock, 12 o'clock, 2 p.m. By 2:30, I started to relax a little. Maybe I really had gone crazy from all these family stories. Maybe Aunt Irina was just a superstitious old woman. At 2:47, there was a knock at the door. Usually, delivery guys knock quickly, rhythmically. This knock was different, slow, persistent, like a funeral march. I went to the door and looked through the peephole. A man in a dark blue jacket stood in the hallway. I couldn't see his face. He was standing at a strange angle. "Who is it?" I shouted, trying to keep my voice from shaking. "I am looking for Anna," he replied. His voice was flat, lifeless, like a robot's. "Wrong apartment, no one by that name lives here." I took a step back, but he knocked again, louder now, more aggressive. The blow was so hard the door shook in its frame. "Please, I know she is in there. I need to speak with Anna." Goosebumps ran down my spine. My hands were sweating as I fumbled to put the chain on. I opened the door a crack, just enough to see his face, and at that moment, his eyes widened. "Your eyes," he whispered, moving so close I could feel his breath. "You have Anna's eyes, the same green with gold flecks." My gaze dropped to his right hand. It was in his jacket pocket, and through the fabric I could make out the clear outline of something metallic. "You are going to tell me where Anna is," he growled, and for the first time, there was emotion in his voice, a cold, merciless rage. I slammed the door shut with all my strength, and immediately, a blow hit it with such force that the drywall wall shuddered. Bam, bam, bam. He wasn't hitting it with his fist. It seemed like he was using some kind of tool. "I know you were in there." His voice boomed in the hallway. "I can wait. You have to come out eventually." My fingers trembled so much I misdialed 911 3 times. I was gasping for breath, telling the dispatcher that a man was trying to break down my door. At that moment, a particularly powerful blow landed, and the chain lock tore out of the doorframe with a crack. The screws clattered to the floor, and the door bounced open a few centimeters. I saw his eye in the gap, cold, blue, without a single spark of humanity. The police arrived quickly within 6 minutes. But the very moment the dispatcher and I heard the siren, the pounding stopped. A dead silence fell. The cops searched everywhere. No fingerprints on the door, no shoe prints in the hall, not a single witness who saw anyone suspicious. The downstairs neighbor said she heard banging but thought it was renovations. The newlyweds next door didn't hear anything at all. The officers looked at me with a mix of pity and annoyance. "Stress at work?" one asked. "Maybe you took something," suggested another. I spent the rest of my birthday barricaded in my apartment, a heavy bookcase pushed against the door. I jumped at every sound, every creak in the old house. But nothing else happened. The clock struck 4, then 5, then 6. I had survived my 23rd birthday, and you know the scariest part. In that moment, I truly believed it was over, that I had somehow broken this cursed cycle. I even drank a glass of wine to celebrate my salvation. I was so blind, so naive. I didn't know yet that the worst was still to come. That in a year, my younger sister, Lena, would celebrate her 23rd birthday, and that the curse wasn't some mystical omen at all, but someone's cold, calculated plan. That behind it all was a hunt for my family that had been going on for decades. But that is the beginning of a whole different story. A story of a vengeance that outlived its creators. A story about how the past can comfort you on the happiest day of your life. You think surviving your 23rd birthday would be the end of it, right? That the nightmare would be over. For a whole year, that is exactly what I thought. The constant tension in my shoulders finally eased. I stopped jumping at every unexpected noise. I even threw out the sleeping pills my doctor had prescribed. I was convinced I had broken the cycle, that our family's strange curse had been nothing more than a self-fulfilling prophecy fueled by paranoia. My younger sister, Lena, she was the one who helped me laugh about it. We were planning her 23rd birthday party, a big, loud affair at a local restaurant, the complete opposite of my locked-down solitary vigil. Over coffee, I told her about the man at the door, about his chilling words. We laughed, a little nervously, about how crazy I had been. "You and your overactive imagination," she'd said, punching my arm playfully. I am not hiding in my apartment. I am living my life. And I believed she would. I truly did. The day of her birthday, I was in a boring budget meeting when my phone vibrated incessantly. It was Mom. I slipped out into the hallway, a joke already on my lips about the party starting early. But the sound that came through the receiver wasn't laughter. It was a raw, guttural sobbing, so violent I could barely understand her. "Mom, calm down. I can't hear you. What is wrong?" "You're your sister," she choked out, each word a struggle. She collapsed at work. The world tilted. I remember the fluorescent lights of the office hallway suddenly feeling too bright, too clinical. I drove to the hospital in a daze, my knuckles white on the steering wheel. The doctors used words like catastrophic cerebral aneurysms and unsurvivable event. They pronounced her dead at 3:23 p.m. on her 23rd birthday. The funeral was a blur of black clothes and muffled cries. But one thing cut through the haze, the way my relatives looked at me. Or rather, the way they refused to look at me. Their eyes would slide away, focusing on the flowers, the casket, anything but my face. It was my aunt who finally pulled me aside, her fingers digging into my arm. She said Lena had mentioned getting strange emails the week before. Someone asking about a woman named Anna. She thought it was spam and deleted them. My blood ran cold. I knew, with a certainty that felt like a physical blow, that those messages were meant for me. That my sister had died for a secret she didn't even know existed. The year that followed was a numb, gray landscape of grief and guilt. On what would have been Lena's 24th birthday, I found myself drawn to the cemetery. I stood by her grave. The fresh flowers I'd brought a stark contrast to the gray stone. The guilt was a heavy stone in my own chest. I was the one who survived. Why? That is when I heard the footsteps behind me on the gravel path. I turned, expecting another mourner. But the woman who stood there was a stranger, her gaze sharp and intent. "You are the one who survived," she stated. her voice low and steady. It wasn't a question. She knew everything. The man at my door, the name Anna, the pattern of deaths. Her name was Victoria, she said. And when she started explaining, the pieces of our family's shattered history began to click into a picture more horrifying than any curse. She pulled a faded photograph from her pocket. It showed my mother, decades younger, her hair a different color, her arm linked with Victoria's. On the back, in faded blue ink, was written, Anna and Vicky, 1999. Anna was your mother's name, Victoria said quietly, watching my reaction. Before she changed it, before she ran, she explained that my mother hadn't just moved for a new job or a fresh start. She had been running from a very dangerous man, someone she had testified against in a major trial. Her testimony had put him away for life, and in the courtroom he had sworn a vow. He would kill her, and any children she ever had, when they turned 23. The same age she was when she betrayed him. The curse wasn't fate. It was a hit list, a systematic, decades-long hunt for anyone connected to the woman who was once Anna. The relatives who died, they weren't random. They were the ones who knew the truth, who could have led the hunter back to my mother. My great-aunt Irina knew, which is why she was so terrified. My sister died because someone, a hired investigator named Seth Robertson, had been tracking our family, learning our routines. And my sister, friendly and open, had unknowingly given him information. My survival wasn't a miracle, it was a fluke. The man pounding on my door that day had been too aggressive, too impatient. He'd scared me into a lockdown before Seth could get close enough to carry out whatever natural death he had planned for me. Lena hadn't been so lucky. I left the cemetery, my mind reeling. I drove straight to my mother's house, my hands shaking so badly the car wobbled in its lane. When she opened the door and saw my face, the photo in my hand, she knew the jig was up. The color drained from her face as she stumbled back into the house. I confronted her in the kitchen, the same room where we'd had so many happy family meals. I know about Anna, I said, my voice trembling with a mix of rage and grief. I know why Lena is dead. She broke down completely, collapsing into a chair at the table. Through sobs, she confessed everything. The brutal triple murder, the intimidating defendant from a powerful, wealthy family. Her decision to be the sole witness, the threat he made in the courtroom, a threat the authorities thought was just bluster. She changed her name, created a new identity with Victoria's help, and spent over 20 years looking over her shoulder, praying it would be enough. She thought if she never spoke of it, never warned us, we would be safer. She was told that knowledge could make us targets, but her silence hadn't protected Lena. It had made her a victim. The pieces were all there now, forming a terrifying mosaic. The car that jumped the curb, likely not an accident. The aneurysm that killed my sister. Victoria suspected a rare, hard-to-detect poison that could trigger such an event. Our family's curse was a man with deep pockets, a long memory, and a network of people willing to do his bidding, making murder look like tragic misfortune. The fear I felt now was different. It wasn't the superstitious dread of a curse. It was the cold, sharp terror of a tangible enemy. An enemy who had already taken my sister and was still out there. The fight wasn't over. It had just begun. And this time, I wasn't going to hide behind a locked door. I was going to find out everything I could about the man who destroyed my family. The knowledge was a poison in my veins, but it was also a catalyst. The vague, superstitious fear was gone, replaced by a cold, clear purpose. We weren't victims of a curse. We were targets in a war we never knew we were fighting, and I was done being a target. The confrontation with my mother was the point of no return. Seeing her shatter in that kitchen, hearing the 2-decade-old terror in her voice, solidified my resolve. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about justice for Lena. Victoria became our strategist, our link to the shadow war that had been waged against us for years. She brought files, photographs, and a grim determination that matched my own. We learned the hunter's name, the man my mother testified against. We never spoke it aloud. It felt like summoning a demon. He was out of prison, his conviction overturned on a technicality, and he had spent his freedom and his considerable wealth building an efficient, ghost-like network of private investigators and assassins. Their mission, to erase every branch of the family tree connected to Anna. We went to the police, of course. We sat in the sterile interview room with a detective who listened to our story with polite skepticism. We presented Victoria's files, the photos of Seth Robertson lurking outside our homes, the pattern of deaths. He saw a grieving family seeing patterns in chaos. Without concrete proof of a crime, he said, there is little we can do. He suggested a restraining order, a piece of paper that felt like a cruel joke against a man who killed with impunity from the shadows. We left the station feeling smaller than when we had entered. That is when we decided to fight fire with fire. Victoria connected us with Samuel, a lawyer who specialized in stalker and witness protection cases. He was pragmatic and unflappable. He helped us understand that the legal system moved slowly, and we needed to build a fortress while we built our case. We documented everything. Every wrong number phone call, every unfamiliar car idling on our street, every piece of mail that felt off. It all went into a growing digital file. The enemy adapted. A van with tinted windows appeared down the street from my mother's house for 3 days. I received an email from a burner account, a collage of photos of me taken from a distance, going about my life, with the words 23, 23, repeated in a horrifying font. They were letting us know they were still watching, that their patience was infinite. My mother, crumbling under the weight of her guilt and fear, revealed her escape fund, $30,000 in cash she'd been hoarding for 15 years, preparing for the day she might have to run again. She begged me to take it and disappear. I refused. I wasn't leaving her, and I wasn't running. We used some of that money to turn her house into a fortress. Cameras covered every angle, motion-sensitive lights lit up the yard, and new, heavy-duty locks were installed on every door and window. It felt like preparing for a siege. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source, a nurse named Kylie who had been with Lena in her final moments. Haunted by the suddenness of my sister's death, she had secretly saved blood samples. We had them tested at a private lab. The results confirmed our darkest suspicion, traces of a rare, fast-metabolizing compound known to trigger aneurysms in people with a specific genetic marker. My sister had been poisoned. The test also revealed I carried the same marker. The only reason I was alive was that Seth Robertson hadn't been able to get close enough to administer the toxin on my birthday. This was the evidence we needed. Samuel took it to the federal prosecutor he'd been quietly liaising with. The game had changed. This was no longer a stalking case. It was a murder investigation, part of a wider pattern that crossed state lines. The FBI got involved. What followed was a whirlwind of tense meetings, secure depositions, and the careful, painstaking work of building a RICO case. We weren't alone. Through Victoria's network, we connected with other families who had been victimized by the same man. Their stories were horrifyingly similar. Accidental deaths, natural causes, all befalling relatives of people connected to that long-ago trial. Together, we formed a coalition of the wounded sharing information and strength. The trial was the final brutal catharsis. My mother, once a trembling ghost of herself, found a steely courage to face the man who had stolen her life and her daughter. She testified, her voice clear and steady, recounting the threats, the years of fear. When it was my turn, I looked directly at him and described finding my sister's body. I described the man at my door. I described the email with the photos. I made the court feel our terror. He was found guilty on all counts: racketeering, murder for hire, conspiracy, and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. As the verdict was read, he locked eyes with my mother across the courtroom and mouthed a single silent word, "Anna." But this time, she didn't flinch. She stared back, her gaze dry and unwavering, until he was led away in chains. In the months that followed, the shadows slowly receded. Seth Robertson was found dead in his cell, an apparent suicide, though none of us believed it. The network, it seemed, was cleaning up its own mess. Life didn't return to normal, because the normal we'd known was a lie. We built something new, something stronger from the rubble. My mother found solace in the support group we'd helped create for other victims. She even began dating a kind man she met there, someone who understood the scars she carried. We planted a tree for Lena in a sun-drenched park, a living monument to replace the cold stone in the cemetery. On the plaque, we didn't put her date of death. We put her name in the words, "Remembered with love." I still sometimes check the rearview mirror. I still feel a jolt of adrenaline when someone knocks too loudly. The fear is a ghost that will probably always live in my house. But it doesn't rule me anymore. We survived. We fought back, and we learned that the most powerful weapon against the darkness isn't a locked door. It is the light you find when you stop hiding and stand together. The curse is over. Our story, finally, is our own.